Hello. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Global Compliance Strategies, Current Veterinary Drug Rules for Exporting Animal Protein. So our presenter today is Leo Schilling, the Laboratory Operations Manager at Eurofins Analytical Labs. In his current role, Leo oversees testing services for mycotoxins and veterinary drugs, residues in food and feed. He ensures operational excellence, quality compliance, and efficiency while serving as a senior technical expert for the animal health market. Leo actively contributes to industry advancement through leadership in meetings, committees, and conferences, driving innovation and knowledge sharing across the sector. All right, so that concludes a brief introduction on Leo and webinar logistics. Leo, I'm just going to hand it right over to you to start the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone, and or good morning, depending on where you're at. I'm going to share some of save some of your bandwidth today and turn off my video as we go through the rest of the presentation today. But I do appreciate you joining, and just before kicking it off, I just want to give you a quick overview of the key topics that we'll be covering today. So these are the areas that matter most when it comes to successfully exporting animal protein while staying compliant with veterinary drug regulations. So first, what you want to kind of focus on is veterinary drug compliance essentials. So we'll start with the regulatory foundation, looking at the FDA export requirements under Section 801E, the USDA APHIS health certification protocols, and the type of export certificates you need. We'll move on to quality and safety standards. We'll explore how frameworks like HACCP, GMP, and SQF support product integrity, along with feed regulations and certifications related to animal welfare and sustainability. Going to move on to international trade trends. So there is a shift in the global landscape. So we're going to just kind of discuss briefly how tariffs and inflation, disease outbreaks, shifting market demands, and similar influences are shaping export strategies. We also have a section on documentation and certification best practices. So we'll walk through how to apply for and manage export certificates, coordinate with APHIS and CVM, and avoid common documentation pitfalls. Kind of wrap up with some case studies and industry insights. I think these are great ways to kind of have a take-home message to bring back to your team. So we'll just look at some real-world examples of how companies have successfully navigated compliance challenges and what lessons you can apply to your own operations. So each of these topics is designed to give you some practical and actionable insights. So please feel free to jot down questions as we go. We should have some time at the end for Q&A. Either way, just jot down your questions or submit them in the chat. And if we don't get them today, I'll certainly be able to follow up with you. Just moving on next, first of all, I'd like to just kind of call your attention to the figure from the USDA Economic Research Service, which depicts the trends and dynamics of the U.S. animal product exports. I think that what jumps out at you the most obviously is a clear increasing trend of the value of those exports, and also who the leaders are. So the European Union by far has the largest, but followed very closely by the United States. And there is significant export value. So the U.S. animal product exports reached over $37 billion in 2023, constituting approximately 1/5 of the total value of the U.S. agriculture exports. There are strong market positions. The U.S. does maintain a strong market position in key destinations for animal agricultural commodities, including Japan, South Korea, China, Mexico, and Canada. In 2022, U.S. exports supplied a substantial portion of Canada's and Mexico's imports of beef, pork, chicken, and dairy commodities. There are some challenges and opportunities we'll be talking about, just disease outbreaks, trade barriers and standards, trade agreements, and geopolitics. Just finally also going to finish up with talking about emerging market growth. So just emerging economies, particularly in South Asia, present significant growth opportunities for the US. So we'll be paying some attention to that as well. And of course, live animal exports. So that's something smaller, but still to be considered. The US exports live animals and genetics, with Mexico, Japan, and China being major markets in 2024. And initiatives like market access grants and export promotion programs support this trade. Next, just kind of giving a kind of a quick overview of really the sort of major players in terms of agencies that are regulating this trade. So let's take a moment to look at the global compliance network that regulates the use of veterinary drug products and animal protein exports. So compliance, the key takeaway on this is that compliance isn't just a domestic issue. It's a global collaboration, and producers work with regulatory bodies across commercial regions to ensure safety, consistency in product quality, and transparency in animal protein trade. The five, well, not the five, I think there are some, I'll go over five agencies, but the FDA oversees veterinary drug approvals and export documentation for shipments that are originating from the US, and also provides insight for importers. The USDA manages animal health certifications and inspections. The European Medicines Agencies, EMA, regulates veterinary medicines across European member states. The VICH harmonizes technical requirements between the US, EU, Japan, and others. MHRA oversees veterinary medicines post-Brexit. And there are others, CFIA in Canada, MPA in Brazil, which is up and coming, AQSIQ in China. And the image here is just sort of intended to illustrate that these agencies form a network of oversight that impacts how products move across borders, and each plays a role in setting standards, including issuing certificates and enforcing compliance. So think about which of these agencies you interact with most often, and just ask yourself if there are others that you need to consider as you expand into new markets. And understanding this network can help you anticipate requirements, avoid delays, and build trust with your international partners. Still continuing here with the overview, and just going to focus on under Section 801E of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The FDA permits the export of certain animal products, including veterinary drugs, animal feed, and devices that may not be approved for sale in the US, provided that they meet specific conditions on their destination. Products that are not approved for US domestic sale, but they still be exported legally if they meet all the following conditions, including conforming to the specifications of that foreign purchaser, complying with the laws of the importing country, of course, and making sure that the labels are clear on the outside of the packaging, and that the package is intended for export, and they are not sold or offered for sale in domestic commerce. So under these provisions, the export of these products that would otherwise be considered adulterated or misbranded or unapproved under US law, as long as they are acceptable to the importing country and properly documented, they are eligible for export. This flow chart really just outlines the key decision points and certificate types involved in exporting animal protein products. Step one is going to be based on your product type. So the first step is identifying whether your product falls under FDA or USDA jurisdiction. So veterinary drugs and feed are regulated by the FDA, while those animal protein products and live animals are handled by USDA APHIS. Certificate selection is also very important. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have the right one. Depending on your product and its approval status, you'll need to choose the appropriate certificate. For example, the FDA offers a certificate to foreign government for approved products and a certificate of exportability for those not approved for use in the US sale, but eligible for export. We also have a variety of other certificates here. It's a couple from the USDA as well, the veterinary health certificate, and then the sanitary and phytosanitary certificates. Finally, submitting your application is step 3. Applications are submitted through the CVM export certification application system for the FDA and through the APHIS veterinary export trade services for USDA. And then finally, step 4 is receiving that certificate and proceeding with your export. So next, just going to kind of go over the role that USDA APHIS has. So the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, or APHIS, ensures that exported animals and animal products meet the health standards of the importing country. And most countries require international health certificates for exports like live animals, embryos, semen, and hatchling eggs. And these certificates are first completed by a USDA accredited veterinarian who's going to perform a physical exam. They'll verify herd health, and they'll confirm that vaccinations and treatments and lab tests have been administered correctly. The vet then signs the ICH, taking full responsibility for its accuracy. And then APHIS endorses their certificate by verifying compliance with the destination country's requirements. They also ensure that all procedures were done by authorized personnel and reviewing the documentation for completeness and accuracy as a service. Once endorsed, signed, and stamped, the certificate is returned to the exporter for use in shipment. And so coordinating with the vet's office, the Veterinary Export Trade Services office supports exporters and veterinarians nationwide. The vet's offices help with reviewing and endorsing health certificates. They help with country-specific export guidance and troubleshooting documentation issues. So a good team to align with if you are concerned with documentation accuracy. Exporters should also contact vets for help with just understanding export requirements, making sure that your destination requirements are fully addressed, submitting paperwork, and then resolving the timeline or compliance issues. Finally, the Veterinary Export Health Certificate System is a digital certification platform that's APHIS's secure online system for export certification, which enables digital creation, signing, and submission of health certificates, and real-time tracking and electronic endorsements. A good variety of benefits with having the digital platform there, obviously reducing paperwork and mailing delays, but also allows the USDA accredited veterinarians to sign electronically, and it is an accepted means of maintaining documentation by many countries for digital submission. So next, starting a new section here. This one covers practical strategies for ensuring compliance when exporting animal protein products. So I'll briefly discuss validated withdrawal periods, residue testing, labeling, and preparation for inspections. So critically, the things that should be considered here, the key compliance topics that are outlined here are establishing validated withdrawal periods, and that's really speaking to a sponsor. In fact, from a producer's perspective, it is maintaining compliance with the use of those products to ensure that the withdrawal periods are correct as they were demonstrated in the development studies. Residue testing and documentation is also very important. Obviously, labeling and packaging for international markets needs to be clear and correct. And then preparing for inspections and audits is a critical component of being prepared and compliant with exports. The overall process just begins with an investigational new animal drug. So, with reference to veterinary drug products exclusively. So when a sponsor has a new drug compound, it can initially be used under investigational purposes, and this allows the sponsor to collect data and to conduct safety studies and efficacy studies. And once the data is collected, they submit a new drug application to FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine. The application has to be included and detailed information about the drug's composition, the manufacturing, the use guidelines, labeling, and the results from safety and efficacy studies. For drugs used in food-producing animals, environmental impact assessments are also required. And this is significant because there are often producers that partner with sponsors. And while you may have an investigation on a new drug in your facility, it is very likely not approved to trade any of that material for export, and it's certainly not okay to use that domestically either until those approvals are completed. So it's just something to keep in mind there if you're a facility that partners with drug sponsors. Next, establishing the safe use guidelines are the next step in that drug development pathway. So what this means to producers is really establishing those safety and efficacy studies, making sure that withdrawal periods are outlined and defined for every species that drug is approved for. Conditional approvals are a little different. They offer a pathway for drugs that meet safety standards, but they haven't yet fully proven effectiveness. There are cases where the FDA or a regulatory body will grant a conditional approval, but the use and trade of those materials are directed under very strict rules. So the drug can be marketed for up to 5 years while the sponsor collects additional data. However, if its full effectiveness isn't demonstrated by the deadline, the approval is revoked. So there needs to be some type of withdrawal, product withdrawal mechanism in your facility for that case. Finally, for species that are too rare or diverse for traditional studies like zoo animals or ornamental fish, the FDA offers index listings. Just keeping this in here for completeness isn't really relevant to this discussion, but there is just this other category. And these allow legal marketing of unapproved drugs under strict conditions, and indexed drugs must carry specific labeling, cannot be used in food-producing animals. So let's take a look at feed regulations. Once again, this isn't necessarily directly on scope with this webinar, but there are certainly cases where animal protein is used in feed exports, and so could be subject to the animal feed regulations. So just first, as as an example, just wanted to be aware of prohibited and exempt protein materials. So I'm just including the bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, which is mad cow disease, as an example. The FDA prohibits the use of most mammalian proteins in feed for ruminants to prevent the spread of this disease. And this rule applies to renderers, feed manufacturers, and distributors. So materials must be labeled clearly, and firms must maintain records to trace the origin and handling of these materials. And that goes for any type of material that there would be restricted or prohibited use. Next, it's important to distinguish between the prohibited and exempt protein materials. Prohibited items do include, like I just mentioned, high-risk cattle tissues like brains or spinal cords from older animals, whole carcasses of BSE positive cattle, and certain types of tallow products where those contaminants can get into the byproduct and passed into other products. On the other hand, there are exempt materials which are considered low risk. Those include blood or milk proteins, gelatin, pure pork or pure horse proteins from single species facilities. Cooked and inspected meat that's further heated and processed for feed is also exempt. Finally, compliance requires strict segregation of materials and clean-out procedures. You want to make sure that clean-out procedures are effective to prevent cross-contamination, and that you have adequate documentation from your suppliers confirming that the prohibited materials are excluded. The FDA also conducts inspections and maintains a dynamic database to monitor industry compliance. That brings us to food safety, hazard analysis and control of biological, chemical, and physical risks, or HACCP, which is a globally accepted system for identifying and controlling hazards in food production. It's often paired with GMPs. This ensures facilities possess and meet hygienic and safety standards. The broader certification, some producers may want to pursue an SQF, which covers both safety and quality, and is recognized by major retailers. In terms of customer-facing claims, raised without antibiotics, certifications from NSF verifies that animals were never exposed to certain types of animal drug compounds. Similarly, non-GMO verification ensures that feed and other inputs are free from genetically modified organisms, which is important for some markets where all those are strictly disallowed. Next, animal welfare and sustainability are increasingly important to buyers and regulators. The NSF Global Animal Wellness Standards go beyond traditional welfare by including emotional and environmental factors. These standards apply across the entire supply chain from hatchery to slaughter, and they do align with 5 freedoms of animal welfare, so get familiar with that if you're not. Finally, the USDA organic certification sets a higher bar. Animals must be raised on certified organic land, fed organic feed, and managed without antibiotics or growth hormones. They must also have access to the outdoors and pasture with humane handling throughout their lives. And these standards not only support animal welfare, but they do also align with sustainability goals. As we wrap up the compliance section, it's essential to highlight one of the most critical components of a robust quality and safety program, which is lab testing. Laboratory testing should not be viewed as a final checkpoint. It must be integrated throughout the manufacturing process, from raw materials, intake, to verifying your suppliers, to finished product release. This testing helps verify that products meet regulatory standards, customer specifications, and quality, and your safety benchmarks. Just some examples here, just thrown out. It would depend on your product what kind of testing is recommended or required by your importing country. But minimally, you'd want to consider microbiological testing to ensure that pathogens like Salmonella and E. coli are absent. Residue testing confirms that there are no veterinary drug withdrawal periods that are in violation and that maximum residue levels are below those limits. Nutritional analysis validates the label claims and supports certifications like non-GMO or raised without antibiotics. And finally, there's environmental monitoring. So your facility has a lot of potential risks in terms of human food safety. And so processing facilities that maintain GMP compliance and prevent cross-contamination frequently are involved in continuous environmental monitoring to ensure that their facility is in compliance with best practice safety standards. Producers should also work closely with accredited laboratories to develop a testing schedule that aligns with their HACCP plans and export requirements and third-party certifications. It's a proactive approach that not only supports regulatory compliance, but also builds trust with buyers and consumers. Next, we're just going to move on to just some emerging challenges. As animal protein producers navigate increasingly complex regulatory framework, it's equally important to understand the broader forces shaping global trade. From shifting geopolitical alliances and economic pressures to disease outbreaks and evolving consumer preferences, the global market is in constant flux. In this section, we're going to explore some external factors that influence export opportunities, production costs, and competitive positioning, including trade policies and biosecurity risks, regional growth trends, and movement of major global players like the EU and Brazil and China. So understanding these dynamics is necessary for building a resilient and forward-looking compliance strategy. Moving on to geopolitical and economic factors, these shifts have a direct impact on animal protein exports. Tariffs and protectionist policies can limit access to key markets, while trade agreements can create new opportunities, or they can also impose stricter compliance requirements. Inflation is another major factor, especially in feed and energy costs, as we're seeing now, which do squeeze margins and affect pricing. So producers must monitor these trends closely to adjust sourcing, pricing, and market strategies to ensure their success and long-term stability. Disease outbreaks and biosecurity are an issue currently. Whether they're zoonotic or not, they can shut down an entire export channel, not just your facility. So highly pathogenic avian influenza and African swine fever are prime examples. These outbreaks often lead to immediate trade restrictions, increased scrutiny, and mandatory testing. So producers really need to invest in robust biosecurity measures, including surveillance, sanitation, traceability, and other process monitoring systems to protect both animal health and market access. Moving on now to just regional trends. There's globally, poultry and agriculture, aquaculture are outpacing other protein sectors due to their efficiency and their affordability. However, North America beef exports are facing challenges from rising production costs and sustainability pressures. Emerging markets in Asia and Africa are fueling demand for affordable lean protein sources, and producers should align product development and marketing with these evolving preferences. Finally, finishing on competitor landscape. The global competitor landscape is shifting. The EU is positioning itself as a leader in sustainable and welfare certified exports. Brazil continues to dominate with cost-effective poultry and beef, while Australia emphasizes traceability and organic standards. China is a unique case, investing heavily in domestic production while maintaining strategic import relationships. So understanding these dynamics helps US producers identify competitive advantages and market positioning strategies. Moving on now to the next section, which is export documentation and certification best practices. Just going to walk through some best practices to help you avoid delays and ensure smooth export certification. When applying for USDA or FDA certificates, it's critical to choose the right type. For FDA regulated products like veterinary drugs, use the certification, application, and tracking system, or CATS, to apply for certificates to foreign government or certificates of free sale. For USDA regulated items like live animals or biologics, use the VEHCS to submit to and track international health certificates. Next, coordination is key. APHIS and FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine have distinct roles. APHIS handles health certification for animals, as previously mentioned, and for biologics as well, while CBM is overseeing drug-related exports and feeds. So if there are specific questions to those, reach out to APHIS Vet's office for help with animal product documentation, and consult with CBM for drug-specific guidance if you have products that are produced with veterinary drugs. Finally, just avoid common pitfalls like many systems will have delays just from submitting the wrong forms, and not understanding which agency to contact or failing to check with the latest import requirements are issues that will stop your product and lead to spoilage and interrupt that export. So also be very sure to verify whether your product has a restricted license, because this will affect which USDA forms you'll need. Moving on next to some case studies. We'll review case study examples of exports from the US to the EU and to other parts of the world as well. We'll also just kind of discuss some common pitfalls and how to avoid them in integrating compliance and quality management systems. This section highlights just some real world examples of successful compliance strategies and also some lessons learned from some export disruptions. Case study one, the form mix-up. A US veterinary vaccine manufacturer was preparing a shipment to South America, and confident in their process, they submitted APHIS Form 2046 for export approval. There was a catch. They'd overlooked that the product carried a restricted license, which required Form 2047 instead. This mistake wasn't caught until APHIS reviewed the paperwork, resulting in a 2-week delay. The company had to scramble to resubmit the correct form and update its internal procedures. And this case highlights how even small documentation errors can have a big consequence in your trade. The lesson here is always verify whether a product license is restricted or unrestricted before choosing the appropriate APHIS form. Case study 2, the certificate confusion. An animal drug company was expanding into Southeast Asia and submitted a certificate of free sale with their shipment. Unfortunately, the importing country required a certificate of foreign government that confirmed CGMP compliance. Customs rejected the shipment, citing the missing in documentation, and the company had to work with the FDA to obtain the correct certificates and revise the export checklist. And this misstep cost them. It cost them time, money, probably credibility. And this really underscores the importance of understanding country-specific documentation requirements. And the lesson here is just understand the specific certificate types accepted by each importing country and ensure CGMP inspections are always up to date. Last case study here I'm just going to share with you today is the zoo sanitary surprise. It's a US exporter of processed animal protein, had a long-standing relationship with a European buyer. And then, so they were confident with their routine, and they shipped a large order without checking for recent regulatory updates. Unwittingly, the destination, well, I guess unknowingly to them, the destination country had added a requirement for a zoo sanitary certificate confirming disease-free status. And so consequently, the shipment was held at port for 10 days, risking spoilage, obvious financial penalties. And so with help from the local vet's office, the exporter secured the necessary documentation and cleared the shipment. But this case serves as a reminder that regulatory landscapes can shift quickly, and they do. And exporters must stay vigilant. So the lesson here is always confirm the current import requirements with the destination country's Ministry of Animal Health and consult APHIS IREGs before setting up a new shipping arrangement. So finally, just looking at some industry insights here. We're wrapping up to the close here, and just want to close with some forward-looking view of how innovation is reshaping compliance in animal protein production. There are some trends in veterinary drug regulation. Veterinary drug regulation is evolving rapidly to meet the new challenges in public health, animal welfare, and international trade. Some examples include the FDA is proposing a new labeling regulation for approved and conditionally approved animal drugs to improve clarity and consistency across products. There's growing emphasis on individualized veterinary care, including updated guidelines for reproductive control and pain management in food-producing animals. There are also advances in monoclonal antibody therapies and AI-assisted diagnostics, expanding treatment options while raising new regulatory considerations. There's also a track in the United States for simplifying non-drug related feed additives to help that process become a little more cumbersome, that will support innovation and herd health that we've already seen in Europe for 20 years. These changes do reflect a broader shift in precision medicine, transparency, and ethical standards. So just something to be on the lookout for. There's also digital traceability and blockchain compliance. Digital technologies are revolutionizing how producers track and verify compliance across the supply chain. So as global market demand increases for more transparency, digital transparency is becoming a competitive advantage, not just a compliance tool. Global collaboration and recognition agreements. So international cooperation is also streamlining regulatory processes and reducing duplication. This trend toward regulatory alignment and shared oversight is key to the future of improved global animal protein trade. Finally, just going to summarize, what we've discussed today. First of all, we just discussed some basics of the regulatory framework. Exporting animal proteins requires compliance with FDA and USDA regulations, including proper documentation and certification. You need to know your certificates. Familiarize yourself with the types of export certificates and when each is required. Stay ahead of compliance challenges. Veterinary drug approvals, feed regulations, feed quality standards are all evolving. So proactive management is essential. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. So your regulatory team should be staying on top of regulatory changes and monitoring all those changes and sharing that internally with your teams and stakeholders. Monitor global trade dynamics. There are geopolitical shifts, disease outbreaks, market trends. All these directly impact export opportunities and restrictions. Document with precision. Accurately and completely document. Documentation is key to avoiding delays and maintaining access to international markets. Finally, learn from real world examples. Learn from the mistakes that others have made in the past, and consider sharing, examples of case studies, internally and with your stakeholders. They can offer really valuable insights into successful compliance strategies and some common pitfalls to avoid. Closing remarks. As we wrap up today, I really would like to thank all of you for making time to sit with us and discuss this topic. It is a dry topic, but of critical importance to all of us who are related to this work. Obviously, navigating drug compliance isn't just about meeting regulatory requirements. It's about building trust and protecting public health and unlocking global opportunities for your products and your company. We've covered the essentials from understanding FDA and USDA framework. So, if your products are being exported from the US, you should be in good shape. We've also discussed managing documentation and responding to international trade dynamics. The key takeaway is pretty clear though. Proactive compliance is not a burden, it's a strategic advantage. So stay informed, stay connected, don't hesitate to reach out for support as you apply these insights to your operations. And we do look forward to seeing your continued success in the global marketplace. And conclusion today is, I really, once again, do appreciate you joining us for this webinar. As global markets evolve and regulatory expectations rise, staying informed and proactive is more critical than ever. So we hope this session has provided you with some practical tools, clearer paths, maybe some renewed confidence in your compliance strategy, But whether you're preparing documentation or managing your quality system or even expanding into new markets, just remember successful imports begin with strong compliance. So stay connected, stay compliant, and you will keep moving forward. If you need additional resources or would like to follow up with us, please reach out. Connect with us on our website, by phone, by email, and connect with me on LinkedIn for future updates if you wish to do that. We do look forward to supporting your continued success. And Scott, I think we do probably have a few minutes for a couple of questions if you have any.
Yeah, thanks so much, Leo. A lot of great information there. So a lot to digest for sure. I do have just a couple handful of questions here. And a lot of, to do with, let's see, to start with export delays, right? So what are some common reasons for export delays? And, how can people kind of, prepare themselves to kind of prevent that? Are there some tools or some information they can have on hand?
That's number one recommendation there is make sure that your regulatory team is strong and focused. So number one, I think is using the wrong certificate type or form is the number one reason for export delays, and it's frustrating because it's super preventable. Misunderstanding country specific requirements is another one. Failing to verify product license registrations and just submitting the incorrect or incomplete documentation. Incomplete documentation is a common problem. So just reviewing the documentation on your side, giving the extra time to follow up with your regulatory body just to make sure that they can provide you with any kind of feedback on their review instead of rushing anything.
Okay, that seems pretty clear. Okay, so you had a slide there on some testing options, right? Obviously, you talked a little bit about that, us being a testing provider. Are there like a collection of particular tests that are key for people to focus on, or there packages that are common for this export of animal protein?
That's a good question. So as a testing service provider, it wouldn't make the most sense to create a custom testing packages by product type. The short answer is that depending on your product, the testing won't be the same. It's very common to have similar testing requirements for all products, but the exact tests themselves vary. They might be testing for the same thing, and the reason that it's important to choose the right method or the right package is because the test might be specific to a certain type of species or matrix. So that's a good question, but I think the best advice I can give is to connect with a testing service provider and just talk about your packages, the regions that they're being exported to. Some regions don't have maximum residue limits for some drugs, others do. So it would be a waste of your money to test for residue, presence of residues in it for a market that doesn't have a limit on them, as an example. It would be for your company and for product quality investigations, it would be good information to have, but it might not be required and necessary in the product documentation. Sorry, I floundered on that one. I think drifted on scope on there, but I think I got the question.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it's sort of a combo of your product type, your destination, and looking at those for your ultimate lead. So you can't necessarily build a package because there's a lot of variables in play.
Absolutely. So not a one size fits all, but also not very mysterious. So I mean, it would be for us, it would be very clear to set up for by product so that the producer could just sort of select that batch of tests.
Certainly. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Leo. I think we'll kind of cut it there. Again, appreciate the information. A lot of great stuff today. Appreciate everybody for attending. Again, tune back in for our next webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a good day.
Take care.